Hey everyone, this is Jim Fitzmaurice from DLT Solutions, bringing you the ContinuousX podcast series. Today we're going to be doing podcast episode number 2 with a group from Red Hat, one of our strategic partners here at DLT. I'd like to do quick introductions in terms of the guests that are joining us today. As I said, Jim Fitzmaurice, I'm the sales manager here at DLT Solutions. I manage the application lifecycle and DevSecOps practices here. Mike?
Hi, I'm Mike Fitzurka. Do the sales engineering and technical bits on podcast creation and in the factory itself. Rick?
Hey everyone, I'm Rick Stewart, Chief Software Technologist at DLT. From the last podcast, you'll know that DLT broke their tech domains into 6 categories, and I lead the application lifecycle domain. Adam?
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I'm Adam Clater. I'm our Chief Strategic Technologies and Programs Architect at Red Hat. Evong?
Hey guys, my name is Evong. I'm the Director of Emerging Technology Solutions Architecture for Public Sector at Red Hat. Matt?
All right, my name is Mark Anderson, and I'm a Senior Solutions Architect for Red Hat and our North American Public Sector, and focusing on the channel partners.
Thanks, guys, and really appreciate you guys joining us today. So as Rick just stated, our episode 1 was an internal focus from a DLT perspective, talking about the DLT Secure Software Factory and what that entails. This episode, we're going to take a minute here to talk about Red Hat and the role that they're playing within the Secure Software Factory. So that being said, Rick and Mike, could you guys discuss the big picture, what is the Secure Software Factory and the role that Red Hat plays within that?
I'll take it first, Mike. It's important to note that the DLT Secure Software Factory is kind of a manifestation of all things modern architectures, DevSecOps in general. And it's important to note that DevSecOps in and of itself is really a cultural movement. It combines the people, processes, and technologies that an agency or an enterprise uses in order to deliver their services faster and securely across their environments. And also the notion that teams working together in collaboration and continuously allow them to provide better services faster and with less defects and with a higher degree of security. So given that, Mike and I were kind of tasked with using our development and operations experience that we've accumulated over 30 some years, how do we use a blank slate and come up with a series of technologies that work together in that modern architecture framework. And there's no better partner to do it with. I'm actually very honored to talk to you guys today. I know Adam, Evong, and Mark from the past, and they are exceptional engineers, architects, et cetera. So their technology within Red Hat really starts with the notion of an open source development model, not open source per se, but the development model, which is taking the best technology from the best engineers around the world and including that into a technology, a platform, not only where the puck is right now, but where it's going. So they're constantly looking for innovative technologies that meet the mark to allow agencies to mature and evolve without being dictatorial and saying you must do this. So part of the DLT Secure Software Factory is to provide a level of platform that not only recognizes the fact that there are some public sector agencies that are very advanced, very evolved, using a high degree of technology, modern technology, but there's also ones that are just starting on this journey. They're still delivering things in bare metal. They're not evolving in their software products. They're delivering awards to contractors that are taking over delivery of their workloads and not providing that collaborative environment, that modern technology. So Red Hat provides a manifestation of that with, particular in the OpenShift container platform. It's dictating or luring agencies in with using containers as their primary source of workload deployment, which gives them portability, flexibility, et cetera, across a wide range of hosts, whether those hosts are going to be bare metal, virtualized, private or public sector, or where we think the puck is going again, which is going to be a hybrid environment for some time in the future. So OpenShift alone solves a lot of those boxes that allow development teams to work in collaboration with testing teams, with operations teams, with networking teams. It provides that single source that you can start with, a great building block that not only takes the software itself and creating it very securely and with a high degree of quality, but it starts from the notion of the operating system up with containers. You have to secure it at the lowest level form in order to be secure wherever you're going to be deploying that. And OpenShift provides that abstraction layer. And not only that, all the Red Hat middleware and all the technology that they're deploying is also deployed in either a container or an operator framework, et cetera. So they're moving in a direction of automation, which is the same mission that the DLT Secure Software Factory is trying to achieve.
Yeah,
Mike, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, just briefly, it kind of following on to the same thing of the containerization and automation. From a development point of view, the more I can spend time on getting my workload done versus having to deal with other things, the infrastructure part of it is, of course, a benefit. And all of that gets applied by OpenShift with their with the containerization, with the self-service nature of I can just bring up something that helps me develop or help me test my code. Certainly operators that are handling a lot of the upgrade best practices for me. Again, and even from a development and an operations point of view, if I can offload that work to someone else who can provide the insight over the industry and apply that to my environment in the form of operators, then and also the that container management system, or the cluster management from the Red Hat
Yes.
Summit demo. That's exactly the kind of thing that I need to not worry about, and I want an agency to come in and worry about that for me. But that's I think what Red Hat really supplies to our factory and to development.
Yeah.
So leave that back to you.
And Adam, I don't know if you want to add on to that, if you want to see how you fit in that, but we're really trying to get the public sector to embrace this notion of you got to move forward or you're going to evolve into nothing.
Yeah, you guys laid out a lot of topics. There's a lot of things to sort of address there. So I think the first thing to acknowledge is it's very difficult for an organization that's been spun up even in the last 10 years to say they're 100% in the cloud. When we look at the federal government or even state and local governments, we've got organizations that have been around for hundreds of years in some cases. And so the technical debt that they kind of bring along with them and the technology footprint that they have really necessitates, as they transition into new technology, that they be in a very much hybrid or multi-cloud environment. I know that we've seen that throughout a variety of departments. Evong, you've been sort of participating with a lot of those. And so hybrid multi-cloud deployments are really the de facto standard across government. Is it going to stay that way into the future? Maybe. It might change. We might have government agencies one day go completely into third-party cloud, privately managed data centers. But like everything in life, it can be a bit of a pendulum as well. So we've swung very much to cloud. We're seeing a lot of workloads swinging back into the data center for a variety of reasons, often cost, management overruns. And so that's sort of the hybrid nature. And I think that's what OpenShift really leans itself to quite well.
Yeah, I think honestly, sometimes I don't give Red Hat enough credit because I've been here this is my 13th year. And I still remember when we were a very small organization filled with, crunchy technology, passionate nerds. But we've come a long way. And, kudos to our leadership because, even though that spirit still drives us, we've learned a couple of things over the past 2 decades. And they had the incredible insight to hone in on two very important things that are defining Red Hat of 2020, right? And the first you guys have talked about, and that's the open hybrid cloud concept, right? Red Hat was very early to recognize that, one cloud to rule them all was not a good thing for anybody, not for the customers, not for the software ecosystem, et cetera. So we really honed in on this notion of enabling customers to hybridize their environment, giving them the freedom of choice, which has been a very meaningful message in federal, as Adam had said. And obviously the second thing that we were a very, very early proponent of was Kubernetes. Someone at Red Hat took a look at Kubernetes and they said, this is it, all in. And no other vendor has made the level of investment and commitment to Kubernetes that we have over the past 5 years. So I think that's why the federal government is choosing to work with Red Hat. And it's incredible to see vendors like DLT, partners like DLT, then take this awesome technology and craft it into real, meaningful business solutions for our customers, like with secure software factories. So.
And it's not just, you mentioned really quickly, Evong, that it was like, okay, we're all in on Kubernetes. But we have to characterize what that really meant. Red Hat had a full-on product offering with OpenShift 2.0 that was built on an in-house containerization, in-house orchestration, and would probably have failed the company if we had stuck with it, because there was no community buy-in into what we were doing. We took a look at what was going on with Docker and Kubernetes, containerization in general, and said, not only are we all in, we are burning our boats. We sank that product and redeveloped it as OpenShift 3.0, brought that to market. And now with OpenShift, we have over 40% of the enterprise-supported Kubernetes deployments in the world. It's been phenomenal. It was a huge commitment.
I agree. Mark, do you want to add anything on there? But Adam, I remember using the cartridges and gears and everything in OpenShift. It was still a great product, don't get me wrong, but it did evolve into something that is just awesome.
It didn't have the community. And so for Red Hat, part of what we look for when we start to get behind a technology is having a really vibrant community behind that. And so that's why we became the number one contributor to Kubernetes outside of Google, right? Like that's the position that Red Hat has. We got an award from Google in 2015 for, our contribution there. Huge contributor to Docker, containerization in general. You look at things like CRIO, which is the default containerization format for Kubernetes. Now with Podman being I actually saw there's a build of Podman for Debian. So it's really becoming pervasive as the standards, and the opportunity Red Hat has to contribute to those communities comes back 100-fold.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'd add on there too, when Adam was talking about the pendulum swinging, for those of us who have been in industry for a while, you see it all the time. Thin client, fat client, whatever, Here, everything's moved to the cloud. Well, in that space, there's a couple things that we might think of as going to be maybe some possible next steps, and that's going to be with container native virtualization coming out. That's in tech preview right now. That'll be available later in part of the year, probably in 4.5 and OpenShift. That and advanced cluster management. So, two things there. Where are you going to put your workloads? We can put them on bare metal, right? So that's what the container native virtualization. And the other piece is that looking across, the hybrid cloud, well, you don't want to write to just one. So that's why OpenShift is important, right? So where are you actually, putting your eggs? What basket are you putting them in? You want to be able so that you can, work across these different cloud providers. And that's where, the cluster management, the advanced cluster management is going to come into play, specifically to be able to manage these different cloud providers. Where do you have your workloads to be able to manage that in one spot? So pretty exciting stuff that's coming out.
Yeah, I would second that, because I think we're trying to offer the customers, hey, don't box yourself into one cloud provider, because that's not where it's going to be in a year, and you're going to kick yourself if you do that. So give yourself options, create an abstraction layer, just like you do in software. You should be doing that at a system level as well.
What's interesting about the container native virtualization is it really turns this sort of antiquated model we find ourselves in on its ear. For so long, And it's funny if you've been here a while, because virtualization, I was a server hugger, right? First and foremost, there was no way my most critical workloads were going on virtualization. And now, not only are we, we've moved to this 100% virtualized world where I'll run a virtual machine in somebody else's data center, somebody else's cloud. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. They're going to deliver a service level. That's what the agreement's about. Well, now this idea that we're going to take those virtual machines, which in the world of Linux are just another process running, encapsulate that inside of a container, apply SE Linux controls around it, and then orchestrate that using something like Kubernetes. It's a little bit mind-bending for a lot of folks, because you never would have thought you would do that 5 years ago.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's really incredible how quickly the Kubernetes community is innovating, and the scope of the workloads that you can deploy on a Kubernetes platform like OpenShift is growing every day. So, I mean, obviously, it's always been flexible enough to host, things from lightweight microservices all the way through data science workloads. But now, a couple technologies that you guys mentioned, OpenShift Operator Framework is giving an opportunity for vendors to build custom controllers to help seamlessly deploy and manage their products on a Kubernetes based product like OpenShift, and also with KubeVirt or container native virtualization, now even virtual machines. So it's incredible to see how much this ecosystem is growing and how rapidly. It's an exciting time to be in IT. It's never been this fast and furious.
So Evong, along those lines, if you were to look into your crystal ball, what does the future in terms of workloads look like in your mind?
If I reflect on how Red Hat has changed over the past 5 years, investing in Kubernetes, it's honestly turned our whole company on its head. And the center of gravity has become Kubernetes, and everything has changed to revolve around it. And that's how dramatic the implications of this technology are. When I first took a look at Kubernetes, I was like, where's this been my whole career, right? It's just solved so many of the fundamental problems that I have spent years and years just battling, firefights of the day and stuff like that. So, the future is honestly limitless.
I also like the role that containerization has played in this, because one of the things we don't think about, or at least I didn't for a while, was that no matter what your application was, you had a very specific way of controlling that application, starting it up, shutting it down, deploying it, giving it resources, allocating IP addresses for it. It's something as simple as Apache. You would have to edit httpd.conf, configure all of those things in there. And what's really nice about containerization is that it comes along and it provides a fairly standard interface for controlling applications. I can send variables into my container, I can get data out of it, but I can give it an IP address, I can tell it how to configure itself, all through this really sort of standardized format that then allows you to layer an orchestration layer like Kubernetes on top of it. If we didn't have a standardized way to talk to all these processes, there's no way we could have all these abstraction layers that Kubernetes provides. So it was really this amazing yin and yang opportunity that we couldn't have had Kubernetes before we had containerization, right? We had to have that standard way to do that. And of course, we couldn't have had containerization if we hadn't had standardization on Linux. So it's like Linux leads to containers, containers lead to Kubernetes, Kubernetes is now leading to things like operators, container native virtualization, and all of this stuff is incredibly related to one another in this massive ecosystem.
I also think, Adam, that it's also opened up other languages and frameworks that allow you to be more granular in your workload development. Microservices, let's put that aside for a moment, but even legacy applications that you can refactor with more microservices type architecture allows you to test faster, allows you to build faster, and to get it into your users' hands faster. That's kind of the essence of DevSecOps, is get it there, but have a safety net. I'm real excited about Quarkus too. I think Quarkus is in the public sector is going to take off, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's so funny because I was on the phone yesterday with someone who was at Red Hat selling with us back in 2012. And one of the big features that we used to talk about so much was that it was a polyglot platform. You could bring any language that you wanted to, as long as there was a cartridge for it, to OpenShift 2.0. Now that's just a blanket assumption. Anything that I can run on Linux, I can have in a container, I can run in this environment. And so if you look at, that's an 8-year window, 9-year, good as it's nearly 21. When is 2020 over, by the way? So you've got that polyglot approach. Not soon enough. And that's table stakes, right? Everybody has to be able to provide that. And so I think you're absolutely right, Rick.
Yeah, we've sort of been talking about how much things have changed over the past 5 years. So, there's an important word of caution there. And Jim, you mentioned looking to the future. Honestly, if you reflect upon the last 5 years, there's been an incredible innovation and growth, but there's been a lot of volatility in the market as well. And that's because, again, this is such an emerging technology and the pace at which things are moving. Companies have come and gone, they've been acquired, they've fizzled out. And there are even more, groups coming in now, starting to invest in this ecosystem. So I think it's important to take a look at not just the product and the platform, but the company that stands behind it and what their commitment to the community is. And so that's why we've been so excited to work with our federal partners, because I think they recognize, again, that Red Hat is all in on this. And we're going to see this through to the future. So.
Yeah, find another company that has ongoing debates with their CEO about what needs to be open sourced. Everything needs to be open sourced. That's who we are. We work in the upstream community first, and I kid you not, there are literally debates with our CEO who is 35 days into the job. Like, how long has Cormier even been sitting in that chair? And people are like, hey, we need to be open sourcing more things. Where at other companies, it's like, well, we're going to open source this sliver, but we certainly couldn't give up the golden goose. And that's just not the way Red Hat operates.
We're still those crunchy nerds. It's never going away. That is part and parcel to who we are. It's in our DNA.
Maybe that's what we should have called our podcast, Crunchy Nerds.
That would work. Bringing it back to our public sector and our government, focus. How do we get the government to embrace these technologies while also, recognizing that it is somewhat a volatile landscape and they're a less risk accepting, agencies out there? How do we bring, and how does Red Hat bring, their new advancements to the government sector? Jump ball.
Yeah, all right, I'll take that. So, I think when you start to talk about highly regulated industries like the government or like financial services, it really starts with security. And so for Red Hat, security for us has always been a really big deal. From, in the early 2000s, we partnered with the NSA around SE Linux. We continue to apply those controls to processes and containers, and now OpenShift automatically assigns discrete SE Linux labels to every container that's deployed on your platform seamlessly. You don't have to do anything special. It just happens. And so it's really important for us to continue to sort of drive security throughout the platform. It's also really important to us to make sure that we're keeping up with the accreditations and standards that are important to our government customers. So things like FIPS 140-2, common criteria, conforming to NIST 853. These are things that Red Hat is continually spending in engineering resources on just to make sure that we're keeping up. So I think what's nice is that in a highly regulated industry, that security profile is going to permeate all the way through, which is why we see people like Goldman Sachs able to start beginning to deploy container native virtualization in their environment. And how much more regulated can you get than the financial industry, especially post 2008? So I think that sort of gold seal, that good housekeeping seal of approval from a security perspective, certainly helps our government customers become a little more comfortable with it. But I know, Evong, you have a lot of these conversations as well. What are the other things that are important besides security?
Well, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about security too. So, and I just wanted to reemphasize, because that's always been what's so great about Red Hat. I mean, we have brought the enterprise perspective to the innovation of open source. And if you take a look at the Kubernetes project specifically, you can really see in the contributions that we've led, that's totally a testament to that. So an example would be the role-based access control model in Kubernetes. when Kubernetes was first incepted, their security model was flat. So if you had access to one workload, you had access to all workloads on that cluster. And you can understand for an enterprise setting, that's not a viable solution. So Red Hat led the contributions to build the role-based access control framework that exists today in Kubernetes, that is adopted as a standard across all Kubernetes implementations. So again, it's like, proof is in the pudding. We have taken our experience in the data centers, in the trenches with these customers, and fed that back to drive innovation in the community that directly addresses those needs.
And talk about, guys, because part of the secure software factory, getting back to Adam, what you were talking about, right, with the security is vital. Like, as the government is moving towards this software factory approach, and there's a lot of eyeballs on the Air Force and Platform One and what they're doing, right? Security is vital to an agency building out a software factory. Can you guys talk about that in terms of, Red Hat? How do you guys, navigate that landscape when it comes to a software factory?
Evong, I'll defer to you.
Well, that's where I think it's really important, not just from like the inherent security within the product itself, but folding security into every step of the process. And that's why the secure software factory is such an awesome thing, right? What it actually enables the developer and development teams to do is push security to the left, right? So it's not like the tail end, the very last thing you think about before you go to production. And obviously that's, the more you defer it, the more risk there is. Because because we're able to automate security scanning and compliance checking and add that into the process as a first-class citizen, that vastly improves our security posture across the board. So that's what's really exciting about what DLT has built.
Yeah, and I think that the automation and the standardization are key, because when you start talking about building applications on top of platforms and building platforms on top of third-party services, what you're really talking about is security inheritance. And how do I inherit the security profile of what's below me? The only way that you can really do that is by automating what you're deploying and building on a standardized baseline, which is where things like the universal base image from Red Hat is so important to us. As we deploy consistent standard containers, we need to have an understanding of what that entire software supply chain is of what I've got in my container. If I'm required to run an environment that's FIPS 140-2, then I need to make sure that any container that I'm bringing in isn't bringing in its own tainted encryption library that's going to invalidate my entire certification. That's vitally important. The Department of Commerce enforces this across a variety of folks. I know it's rampant throughout the Department of Defense as well. So that FIPS certification follows the software supply chain, which is derived from the base image of the containers you're deploying.
Yeah, and one of the things, Adam, and I think you hit the nail on the head, because it's one thing for everyone to say their platforms are secure, their containers are secure. You got to prove it. That's the whole compliance thing. It's how do you go about doing that? And I know Red Hat is kind of the tip of the spear within the public sector on trying to get their arms around this continuous ATO concept, which is literally providing a good technology, but proving that you've put the right controls in to ensure that you're doing the right things continuously.
And proving that you've done things correctly from a security profile every time you make a commit or every time you make a build of your software. I've heard security vendors say, we're like the TurboTax of security. You run our scan and we pre-do all the forms for you, and then we help you, by April 15th, get your security accreditation in. Well, guess what? I need to know my tax situation every single day, not only on April 15th. And so this idea of continuous, we need to be able to deliver exactly how much we owe in taxes or how much we owe in security footprint every time we make a commit to that environment. Doing a one-time scan isn't going to deliver that. It's got to be a continuous part of your pipeline. I think you guys have done a lot of work towards that.
Hey, yeah, I love that. Can I steal that? Bonus steal that analogy. That's great.
That bonus points, Adam, for bringing in continuous into the conversation.
It's all open source, Rick. Do it to what you please.
So, Mark, let me ask you, what excites you most in terms of, from a Red Hat perspective that you're currently working on, and what gets you up in the morning in terms of, just your job and working at Red Hat and the stuff that you and your team are working on?
So I would say, it goes a lot into what we're talking about here with the secure software factory, right? And that is, talking with customers about, what can happen along this process. So I came to Red Hat with, coming from 28 years experience doing development and, understanding what the operation teams are going through, because I was the one that was yelling at them all the time, like, I need to get code out the door quicker, faster. What's going on? Why can't I do this? And it's really this whole chain of delivering that platform there down at the bottom that says, okay, we can do this. And along this process, there's these checks and balances that have to occur, which we're setting up at the software factory, right? So if I push out my code, let's say we get it into a container and it's marching along this process, right? If it gets checked along the way, what we're allowing it to have happen is this continuous process, as we've been talking about. It can march out to the door. It can get out there quicker. People can see that the scans have been done, that they've been done properly. And if it does fail, it can come back to us and we can take care of it. But if we did our jobs right, one of my partner SAs said something to me, really what we're trying to do is from concept to consumption. We're trying to deliver business value, faster. And, getting people to understand that this can happen, that we can put a common platform down, and that these things can be checked off. The operations teams they're always getting crushed. When I would go to them, there's a lot of time like I can't get to it today. I've got so many other plates spinning out there that I just can't get to it, and we're begging for time. Like, can you please check this? I need to get this out the door. And this gives them the opportunity now to go back and, these things are working well. These things are in place. I can let it go through. I don't have to physically check it every time. I trust that these mechanisms are in place. And it just really empowers them to turn their head from just focusing on, I've got to make sure everything's, working right. I don't know how you sleep, really. I've got friends that have thousands, tens of thousands of servers that they monitor, right? Well, these types of concepts allow for us to get software out the door, better, smarter, faster, if you will. So it's kind of where I'm coming from and what I like to talk to people about.
Yeah, we were at an event, Jim and I, probably about 6 months ago, and it was the Systems Engineering Institute. They had a CISO talking on there, and we asked the question, how many CISOs actually are involved in the shift left, the development process? And she said practically none. They all wait at the goal line, waiting for you to deliver something and prove to them what you've gone through in order to push your workload into production. And that simply can't happen. The speed in which you're talking about, you can't have a bottleneck at the end. You have to incorporate it all through the process.
Yeah, I think that it really brings to it can really kind of take away this us versus them mentality. Yes. It was almost a little bit of gang warfare, going on in the, why won't they do this for us? And it can just alleviate that problem, right? Let us push it out. If it's done, I can do 10 deployments a day. It doesn't matter, just let it get through the door if it meets the criteria.
And that kind of behavior that kind of behavior is indicative of the fundamental breakdown within the CIO organization, right? Like it's just broken. The goal that the CIO organization has is to deliver more value to the business faster. And so in order to do that, we have to have security involved from the beginning, because remember, what we're really trying to do with agile software development is shrink the aperture of what we're working on, so that we're working on something so small that if it does fail, it doesn't take the entire system down, and so that we can get it done incredibly quickly. We want to do that over and over and over again to show continuous returns at a constant pace back to the business, not these big swings up and down, blah, 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 blah. Having that roadblock at the very end invalidates all of that from the agile philosophy.
I agree. And another 10 points. A Lloyd Braun for continuous again, Adam. Nice.
You need your bell, Rick.
Nice.
So, hey, Adam, I want to circle back to something you said earlier. So you mentioned the Goldman Sachs study, and really that was a lot of eyeballs. That got a lot of attention when that was announced with you guys about virtual machines being run as containers in OpenShift. Would love to hear you and Evong and Mark's thoughts on that story when it broke, because that was a game changer in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I've been saying for years, you've got to make a decision of whether you want to run your next generation workloads on your legacy platform or your legacy workloads on your next generation platform. I almost messed myself up there. And so what it's really about is are we going to build and maintain this ancient virtualization infrastructure so that we can then pile containerization on top of it alongside virtual machines? Or are we really going to say, okay, most things are going to be containerized, whether that be a physical or virtual? There's interesting benefits from being virtualized, but the reality is the virtual machine workload, I think that footprint is going to shrink dramatically. Those should be sort of off to the side on our containerization footprint. But what's great about that is we get to appreciate all of the benefits of Kubernetes for that virtual machine, the automation, the orchestration, the network management that comes along with that, with the software-defined networking in OpenShift, container native virtualization. All of those things get to come together and make virtual machines even better while we sort of have to maintain them, with the reality being, multi-container deployments.
And self-healing, big.
Yeah, and jump in there real quick on that too. So this is where it comes into play, attrition over time, right? So you've got a VM sitting there that's got a workload on it. It's some application. It's been there for a long time, right? The people who developed it might have moved on. The admins, it could be a couple of months ago that they made a configuration change on it or whatever. But I mean, the big deal is that you're going in. It's a mission critical workload. I don't want to change it. I can't pull it apart. So maybe to ask is, all right, we're going to move to a container-driven architecture, but I've got these things working out there that I can't tear them down. I can't pull on them. We're not sure the tentacles that are involved. So the great thing here is that I can move that workload. I can take the whole VM and I can put it in a container, and that means I can get a common platform going. I can keep this one running. I'm not going to touch it. It's not going to break, right? And now I can work towards this next generation piece. And that's really where this benefit of OpenShift providing that container native virtualization is really starting to come into play. So,
great. Anything to add, Evong, before I touch a third rail?
Uh-oh.
It's Inception, yeah. I mean, it's pretty cool stuff. So I am very excited to see how our federal customers will start adopting this technology and the implications it'll have on the data center. It's going to be really interesting.
Terrific. The third rail that I'm going to bring up, probably with a lot of technology companies, and this is kind of my little pet peeve, because are you a DevOps or a DevSecOps proponent? My old school is, hey, security should have been involved in operations anyway, or within the whole thing. There's no need to bring it out overtly. But I've been kind of cajoled into thinking that it's the correct term to make it top of mind. So I'm going to go around, put you on the spot, Adam, Evong, and then Mark. DevOps or DevSecOps?
SecDev, SecOps, Sec. Security should be in between all the layers, right? It should be everywhere. I agree that it's been implied since the beginning, but we also have to recognize that those really are sort of the three legs of the CIO stool. And if we want to do more than just paying lip service to it, I think it certainly helps to be inclusive of security in the process. So it's a very good, gentle reminder, as well as a little nudge to our security colleagues to say, hey, come on, you're involved in this. Let's go.
All right, Evong?
Yeah, you kind of stole my line, because I was going to ask, is it SecDevOps or DevSecOps? That's really the question. But yeah, I think for a long time we really lacked the technology means. It's just, and obviously just fundamentally like the organizational challenges to have security be integral into our process without it being so incredibly onerous, right? And so that's why it's so exciting what DLT has built, because now we finally have an opportunity to be able to make them part and parcel of every step of the development process without it being something that is causing a tremendous amount of friction in the organization. So.
All right.
So, I'll like to take that last word, the friction that's sitting there, and that's really what I experienced for many, many, many years, right? And so, I don't think it's an ordering. I think it's that Venn diagram, if you will, where all three of them are together, right? And we're looking for that middle ground. So coming from the development side for so many years, we're looking for the operations teams. We're looking for the security teams to actually be a part of the process of what we're developing, right? I will tell you, there's so many different things that from a development side that we've got to juggle. If we're making web apps, right? If we're making things that communicate with databases, if we're developing databases, generally the developers have their hands in all those pieces, right? And so now security comes into play, and this is where we need the help from the security experts to come in and say, look, here's the problem, here's the things that you need to be aware of. So, and we don't want to do that at the end. We can't do it at the end, right? We need to do that when we're actually developing the code. So we need them to be involved. And we also need the same from our operations teams, right? So it really needs to be more of a partnership. So
that's key, Mark. It's really about building that organizational trust. Because if you look at the CIO's organization today, Dev doesn't trust Ops. Ops doesn't trust Dev. Their priorities are in conflict with one another, right? Mm-hmm. Ops wants to maintain this infrastructure to service the business as it is today. Dev wants to introduce change to service where the business is going. And security, like, they hate it when I say this, they trust no one by default, right? Like, that's just sort of their approach. And so, first of all, organizations outside the CIO organization can see and feel that. It's palpable. They know that there's this mistrust inside. And so it really comes down to within that CIO's organization, building that trust across the teams while being able to validate, right? So it's trust but verify and say, okay, I understand as a security person that the developer is going to do this. I am going to run this series of reports and tools against what they've done to validate what they've done before I'm going to allow that to the next step. Ops loves that because they don't want somebody coming in and breaking their environment. And sure, if I can test and guarantee that what you're doing is not going to break our production environment, I will allow you to deploy 30 times a day automatically. But only once I have that test. And oh, by the way, the change you're making is so small, the rollback is going to take us 30 seconds, 5 minutes, whatever is appropriate for our organization. But we're going to get it down to that size and that pace. Then we can start to deliver these things, right? But that's not tooling. That has nothing to do with the tools. That's all about building organizational trust.
And I like what I'm hearing because of the sometimes the shift left always seems to be shifting it onto the developer responsibility. You're still talking about, that there's an operations team who has operations expertise. They're still involved. We need them earlier. And the same with security. No developer can know every operational technique and all security, codes to follow. You're shifting left, but you're shifting left the whole team, not just onto the development team. I like what I hear because
the developers are busy learning the changes in frameworks that are happening all the time. There's new things. There's just so many things going on that they've got to keep track of. The security piece is incredibly important. But while there's going to be a lot of the development teams that may have an interest in that, and that's part of what they like to dig into, it's not the foundation of what we do day in and day out, right? So we need that help. We need that partnership. We rely on that.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's even like ask the developer to tune a database. That would be significantly different. It's a different mindset. So you have to bring in those mindsets, those controls earlier. I agree with Fitz 100%. This full stack developer, I think it's a unicorn because you need all those different experiences, knowledge sets, skill sets, etc., but working in harmony.
Yep.
So guys, as we wind down here, as we said when we kicked this off, so the name of this podcast is ContinuousX. So we're going to get into the habit, make this kind of a play here with each episode that we do, to ask the guest speakers, each one of you, if you could continually do one thing, and it can be anything, what would it be? Evong, we'll start with you.
Honestly, I've been trapped in this house with a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. It was coffee for me.
Continuous
I'm
Saturday.
feeling my afternoon slump too. So if there were an automatic coffee delivery system, I would sign up for it right now.
Continuous coffee.
Mark?
Oh gosh, is anything on the table? I would like to continue and go to the beach. Go to the Dominican, please. Yeah.
Well, continuous. I think I can get behind Evong's espresso IV drip concept. I think the continuous caffeine. I know. I go through these cycles, so I've only had 2 today. I've tried to keep myself down to just 1 espresso drink a day. But yeah, I think that would be the winner.
Nice. Well, hey, guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys participating in our episode 2 here of the ContinuousX podcast series. Thank you so much for joining today.
Sure.
And
thanks for having us.
T-shirts to be delivered soon.